Love Forever Day. And Dave Haslam, writer and DJ, in fact, former Hacienda DJ, Dave Haslam has written a book called Searching for Love, Courtney Love in Liverpool, 1982. And he's on the line. Hello, Dave.
Hi, how you doing?
Very well. Lovely to speak to you this morning. Thanks for coming on. How are you?
Yeah, Courtney forever. I mean,
are you enjoying it so far?
Yeah, and also, when I wrote the book, I began, as a fan of her work. But I at the end, I was absolutely Team Courtney, when I researched her life. Yeah. And my admiration for her is just huge.
What changed when you were researching the book? What elevated your admiration?
Well, the book is about when she went to Liverpool for a few months with her friend Robin, and she was 17 at the time. So it was, before Hole and Courtney and everything. Before Kurt. And I think she was very lost in the world. She had a very dysfunctional childhood. She arrived in Liverpool not knowing anyone, apart from having a vague idea she wanted to hang out with the Teardrop Explodes. Yeah. She was so into her music. But, it was when I realised the obstacles that she'd gone through, both as a child before she arrived, and then also some of the, I think you could call it misogyny that she experienced whilst in Liverpool. I think a lot of the people around in the scene found her kind of irritating in a way that they wouldn't if she'd been a lad. She was into her music. She read The Enemy. She went to Probe Records. She wanted to hear new stuff. She went to gigs. And yet they kind of, in a way, wanted to put her in a pigeonhole mark groupie. And that was just not what she was. Yeah. And then further obstacles, obviously, in her life after Liverpool, and that's really where my admiration for her came from.
Yeah. So I'm picturing Courtney Love as a 17-year-old, probably the coolest 17-year-old that ever lived. In fact, so cool and so in love with music that she travels all the way to Liverpool just out of a love for the Teardrop Explodes. So what happened then? She arrives in Liverpool. How did she
Well, she'd actually met the Teardrop Explodes in Dublin. Okay. And had talked to Julian Cope, and then her and her friend Robin saw them again in London. And the two girls were over from Portland, Oregon, to kind of experience England, their first time in Europe. And they casually mentioned to Julian Cope that they hadn't got any plans going forward. And he said, well, you should go to Liverpool. You could stay at my place. Just knock on the door. And he was in a house share in Liverpool. And she knocked on the door, and his housemates included Paul Simpson of the Wild Swans, Pete DeFreitas from Echo and the Bunnymen, and they didn't know anything about it. And the girls just knocked on the door and said Julian said we could stay in his room, and that was kind of that's the kind of young woman that I think she was. Yeah. At the time, a brunette. So when you picture her, you need to think of her as a brunette. Her hairstyle changed a little bit while she was in.
Are there any photos in the book of her at this time?
There are photos around, of her in that, as a brunette. And so she was there when she celebrated her 18th birthday. I think the thing about her experience, which she says is one of the most important experiences in her life, was that being around musicians like the two that I've mentioned, and being around Teardrop Explodes, Echo and the Bunnymen, Wah Heat. I mean, Liverpool in 1982 was such a fertile place for music. And she would see them on the front of the NME. But then she'd also see Ian McCulloch walking down Bold Street in an overcoat and kind of follow him. And it was that idea that rock stars had a real life and that they were accessible. The music world was accessible. She'd come from America where she'd seen kind of stadium bands play. And it was like rock and roll was something in the far distance that you consumed. But being in Liverpool gave her the idea that actually rock and roll was something that you could make, and it was there and it was touchable. So all the stuff in her head from a dysfunctional childhood, all that kind of anger, and all her ideas and all her influences, she realised that rock and roll was the thing that the way she could express herself and get rid of that and articulate that. And it was just by being in Liverpool and being amongst those people, that she became, inspired. It was like a pathway to her creativity.
You can see how if her trip to Liverpool never happened, we probably wouldn't have the Courtney Love that we know and love now.
No, I don't think so,
amazing.
because I think I don't think she hadn't got a home really at that point, and although she didn't stay at Liverpool, more than about six months, in a way it became her home. It became her education.
Yeah.
It became her inspiration.
Yeah.
She later, I think, Hole did a live version of "Do It Clean" by Echo and the Bunnymen, and so it was. It was for her. It was an incredible time, but writing the book, I talked to her about it afterwards, and she said to me, "Memory is very weird," because a lot of the book is about Courtney in Liverpool, but told through the voices of people who knew her rather than her voice.
Yeah.
So you get this kind of jigsaw of Scouse lads, all having a view and an opinion and a memory, and obviously they don't quite add up because none of them can tell the full truth.
Yeah.
But when Courtney left Liverpool, she took the National Express bus down to Heathrow, and she wrote in her diary a list of what she wanted to do next, and it was like a list for her life. It was one of them was it was about her behaviour and about becoming a musician, and so she was really determined. I think the one thing that I got from it was how she would put herself in a situation bravely, even though there might be some hostility. She was in those bars, in those clubs, in those gigs, hanging out with those lads, and all the time absorbing the music.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, you can just see how, like I say, that trip was so pivotal to her story. Dave Haslam, thank you so much for chatting about this with me this morning. That's a real insight. And the book is called Searching for Love, Courtney Love in Liverpool, 1982. And aptly enough, we have a track now from Teardrop Explodes. Thanks so much, Dave.